Right now, as you listen to this, approximately 411 ancient photons are passing through every cubic centimeter of your body, through your chest, through the slow movement of your lungs, through the space between every cell, not every second, continuously, without pause. Since before this planet existed, they are not starlight, they are not from any galaxy you will ever see, they are older. They were released 380,000 years after the Big Bang, in a moment that lasted 20,000 years, when the universe went from completely opaque to completely transparent all at once. Every photon it had been holding since the beginning of time burst free in a single great clearing. And that light is still here, in this room, in your body, moving through you right now at 186,000 miles per second, and leaving nothing you can feel. Here is what most people get wrong about the darkness of the universe. They assume the darkness means emptiness. It does not. Every cubic centimeter of space around you holds 411 of these photons. They outnumber every other photon in the observable universe, 400 to 1. You cannot see any of them. In the year 1823, a German astronomer asked a question so plain it sounds like something a child asks in the dark. If the universe is full of light, why does the night sky appear dark? It would take 140 years to begin answering him. It would take a pair of pigeons roosting inside a 20-foot horn antenna in New Jersey, and a satellite cooled to 1/10 of a degree above absolute zero, 27 times colder than the light itself, to hear what the universe had been broadcasting all along. Tonight, we follow that answer all the way back to the beginning. Get comfortable. Let your shoulders soften. None of this is anything you need to hold. Let's begin. Stay where you are. There is nothing here you need to do. The light was already passing through you before I said a word, and it will go on passing through you long after your eyes have closed for the night. You do not have to catch it. You could not if you tried. Consider, gently, what that means. The most abundant thing in the entire universe is streaming through your body at this exact moment, and you have never once felt it. Not on your skin, not behind your eyes. It leaves no warmth, no weight, no shadow. 411 of them in every space the size of a sugar cube, and the sugar cube of air just above your pillow holds them too, and the one beside it, and the one beside that, out past the ceiling, out past the roof, out past the last thin edge of the atmosphere. And it never thins. It is the same everywhere. It fills the room you are lying in, and it fills the space between the stars with exactly the same faint, even glow. We tend to think of space as dark and empty. It is neither. It is flooded. It is drowning in ancient light. And the only reason you have spent your whole life believing otherwise is that this light was stretched over more than 13 billion years into a color your eyes were never built to see. That is the thread we will follow tonight, where this light came from, and why the young universe kept it sealed away for its first 380,000 years. Why the slow expansion of everything pulled it so far past the edge of sight, and how a handful of people, spread across 2 centuries, quietly worked out that the darkness overhead was never really dark at all. But before any of that can make sense, we have to go back to the question itself. Back to the strange, simple fact that unsettled astronomers for 400 years, long before anyone knew there was ancient light to find. It begins, as so many of these things do, with someone lying awake, looking up, and refusing to accept the obvious answer. His name was Johannes Kepler, and the year was 1610. He is remembered now for other things, for the shape of the planet's paths, for the quiet mathematics that let us predict where a world would be on a given night. But on this particular question he was not calculating. He was simply standing in the dark, doing something you have done 1,000 times without ever thinking to be troubled by it. He was looking up at the night sky, and he was noticing that it was black. That should not sound strange to you. Of course the night is black. You have known that since before you had words for it. The sun goes down, and the sky empties, and a scattering of stars comes out, and the space between them is dark. It is the most ordinary fact in your life. And yet Kepler looked at that darkness and felt something underneath it move, some small wrongness he could not immediately name, because he had begun to wonder whether the universe might be infinite, whether the stars went on forever in every direction, without edge, without end. And if they did, he realized, then the night should not be black at all. Let that thought unfold slowly, because it is the whole seed of tonight. Imagine standing in the middle of a forest that has no edge, a forest that stretches out in every direction farther than you could ever walk, with trees in every gap and beyond every gap, on and on without end. Now look outward through the trunks. In the near distance you see individual trees, and between them, little slots of open space. But those slots are not really open. Look far enough along any one of them and eventually, somewhere out in the depth of the forest, your line of sight lands on bark. There is no direction you can face that does not, sooner or later, end on a tree. The gaps close. The whole horizon becomes a solid wall of wood. Now trade the trees for stars. If the universe truly is endless, and truly is filled everywhere with stars, then every single line you could draw outward from your eye, every possible direction you could look, must eventually land on the burning surface of some star. Not most directions, every direction. There would be no gaps between the stars, no slots of empty black, because behind every apparent gap would be another star, and behind that one another, forever. The entire sky, from horizon to horizon, should blaze with the brightness of a stellar surface. The night should be as bright as the face of the sun. There should be no night at all, and yet you have lived your whole life beneath a dark sky. So something is wrong. Either the universe is not infinite, or it is not evenly filled with stars, or something is quietly eating the light before it arrives. Kepler chose the first answer. To him, the darkness overhead was proof that the universe had to have an edge, that it could not go on forever, because if it did, the sky would burn. He used the black of night as a wall around creation. And then he set the question down, and the world mostly forgot it for a while, the way we forget most things that make us uncomfortable in the dark. But it did not stay forgotten. That is the strange gravity of this particular question. It kept returning, generation after generation, to unsettle people who had every reason to be thinking about something else. Before Kepler, back in the 1500s, an English astronomer named Thomas Digges had already brushed up against the edge of it. One of the first in Europe to imagine the stars scattered endlessly through space, rather than fixed to a single crystal shell. He glimpsed the infinite, and did not quite see the trap folded inside it. The trap waited. It caught others as the centuries turned. In the 1700s, the astronomer Edmund Halley, the same Halley whose name now rides on a comet, turned the problem over in front of the Royal Society and could not fully solve it. Around the same time, a Swiss astronomer named Jean-Philippe Loy de Chazeau worked at it with real care, trying to calculate just how bright that infinite forest of stars ought to make the sky, and reaching for an escape. Perhaps, he suggested, some thin substance out in space was soaking up the starlight over those enormous distances, dimming the far stars before their glow could reach us. It was a reasonable guess. Hold on to it gently, because it is exactly the guess that will come back later, wearing a slightly better costume, and it will be wrong for a reason worth waiting for. You do not need to hold any of these names in your memory. Let them pass through you like the others. What matters is only the shape of the thing, the way this small black splinter of a question kept working its way into one careful mind after another across 200 years, and how none of them could quite pull it out. Each of them, in his own century, looked up at the same darkness you can see from your own window tonight, and each of them understood that it should not be there, and none of them could say why it was. The question finally took the name it still carries in the early 1800s, from a German astronomer named Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers. In 1823 he laid the paradox out cleanly, the way you lay out a problem you have decided to actually face. An infinite universe. Stars everywhere, evenly spread. Every line of sight ending on a star. A sky that ought to be uniformly, unbearably bright, and yet is not. It became known as Olbers' paradox, though as you have already heard, he was far from the first to be kept awake by it. He simply stated it clearly enough that it could no longer be ignored, and Olbers reached, as Chezeaux had before him, for the comforting answer. He proposed that the space between the stars was not perfectly empty, that it held dust and dark matter, clouds of some absorbing stuff drifting between us and the far reaches of the universe. That dust, he thought, would drink in the light of the most distant stars, would swallow their glow before it ever crossed the gulf to Earth. And that was why the sky stayed dark. It feels right the first time you hear it. It feels like the sort of thing that ought to work. But sit with it a moment longer than he did, in the way you can sit with things now, slow and unhurried, with nothing to solve and nowhere to be. Picture that dust out there in the dark, catching starlight from all sides, star after star after star, pouring their light into it across the ages. What happens to something that absorbs light without end? It warms. Anything that keeps drinking in radiation cannot simply hold it forever. It heats up. And if you let it heat for long enough, bathed on every side by an infinite sky full of stars, it will climb to the very same temperature as the starlight falling on it. It will reach a balance, a thermal equilibrium, and once it does, it can no longer soak up any more without giving just as much back. The dust, having grown as hot as the stars themselves, would begin to glow exactly as brightly as the stars it was meant to hide behind. So the shield becomes a lamp. The curtain you hung to darken the sky catches fire and shines with the same light it was supposed to block. Olbers' escape does not close the trap, it only moves it. And this is the quiet lesson buried in 2 centuries of clever people reaching for the same wrong door, one after another, each certain he had found the way out. The night sky refuses to be explained by hiding the light somewhere. The light will not stay hidden. If the universe is infinite and old and evenly filled with shining things, then no amount of dust, no clever screen, no absorbing cloud can keep the darkness overhead. The blackness you see is not a thing that is covering the stars. It is telling you something true about the universe itself, something none of these men had the pieces to hear. There is one more voice in this long line before the answer arrives, and it is the one you would least expect. Not an astronomer at all. In 1848, the American writer Edgar Allan Poe, the same man who wrote The Ravens and the Buried Hearts and The Slow Dread of the Telltale, sat down to write a strange, sprawling prose poem about the whole of creation, a work he called Eureka. He was dying, more or less, and he was not doing mathematics, and by every ordinary measure he had no business being right about anything in the sky. And yet he looked at the same dark and reached, in plain and almost mournful language, for an idea none of the trained men had quite dared to hold. Perhaps, he wrote, the reason the spaces between the stars are dark is simply that the light from the farthest stars has not yet arrived, that the universe has not been shining forever, that there are depths so distant that no ray from them has had time, in all the ages of the world, to cross the void and reach a human eye. Feel how quietly enormous that is. He was saying, without the equations to prove it, that the darkness is not empty and it is not blocked. The darkness is young. The darkness is light that is still on its way. And underneath his words, though he could not have known the machinery of it, sat the 2 ideas that would finally close this 400-year-old wound. That the universe has a beginning, an age, a first morning, and that the light from before a certain distance simply has not had the time to arrive. A poet in the last months of his life had felt the true shape of the answer in the dark, decades before anyone could measure it. But to understand why he was right, and how much stranger the real answer turned out to be than even he imagined, we have to leave the question of the dark sky for a moment, and go all the way back to the beginning of everything, to a time when the universe held all its light, and would not let any of it go. Cell/parameter. To go back that far, you cannot walk. and you cannot look. There is no telescope with a lens long enough, no mountain high enough, no eye patient enough. The only road that reaches the beginning of everything is arithmetic, and for most of human history no one thought to travel it. The beginning was a matter for scripture, or for hymns, or for silence. It was not something you worked out on a page with a pencil in a warm room. And then, quietly, in the way the very largest ideas tend to arrive, without trumpets, without a crowd, someone began to do the math. The first was a physicist named Richard Tolman, and the year was 1934. He was not chasing the dark sky, and he was not yet thinking about antennas, or about any of the strange things that would come later. He was thinking about heat, and about what happens to heat inside a universe that will not hold still. And he proved something quiet and beautiful. He showed that if the whole of space is expanding, then any light trapped inside it must cool as it goes, the way a room cools when you open every window at once. But it does more than cool. It cools perfectly. It keeps the exact smooth signature of a thing that is simply warm. The same signature you would find in a dying ember, or in an iron bar pulled from a fire, glowing white, then orange, then a deep and failing red, then dark. Tolman showed that the universe could take the brightest heat imaginable and carry it down, degree by degree, across an unthinkable stretch of time, and never once smudge that signature. The fire would fade, but it would still be recognizably fire. Sit with that for a moment. You do not need to hold on to the mathematics. Let it pass through you the way the light does. Just keep the shape of the idea. That the warmth of the beginning could survive, cooling, all the way down to now. Because 14 years later, in 1948, 3 people took Tolman's quiet proof and asked the obvious and terrifying next question. If the universe was once impossibly hot and impossibly dense, and if it has been expanding and cooling ever since, then that leftover warmth should still be here. Not somewhere, everywhere, filling every corner of space, gently, faintly, all the time. Their names were George Gamow, and Ralph Alpher, and Robert Herman, and they did something no one grappling with the dark sky had ever managed to do. They put a number on it. They calculated the temperature that the ashes of creation should have cooled to by now, and the number they reached was about 5 degrees above absolute zero. Understand how small that is. Absolute zero is the coldest anything can ever be, the point where all motion stops, colder than the darkest floor of the deepest ocean, colder than the far side of the coldest moon in the outer dark. And they were saying the entire universe is bathed in a warmth just 5 degrees above that floor. A warmth so slight it is very nearly nothing. But not nothing. A steady, universal, unimaginably faint glow, left over from the moment the universe first caught fire. And they wrote it down, in 1948, on paper, in ordinary ink, years before any machine on Earth could have confirmed a single word of it. Notice how far we have climbed in only 3 centuries. Kepler stood in his doorway and wondered why the night was dark. Olbers turned that wonder into a paradox that would not let go. Poe, in the last of his days, guessed at the answer in poetry. And now, here a handful of physicists were no longer asking why the sky was dark at all. They were calculating the exact temperature of the light that fills that dark. The question had grown from a feeling into a number, and the number was almost right. And here is the part that should keep a person awake, except that tonight it will not, because tonight you are only listening, and you can let it go the moment it has passed. Almost no one noticed. The prediction of the afterglow of creation, one of the most extraordinary calculations anyone had ever made, was published and read by a few, and then quietly set down. It slipped into the back pages of journals and stayed there. Gamow and Alpha and Herman had reached back and touched the first morning of the universe with nothing but arithmetic, and the world, for the most part, turned its attention elsewhere. Neither Alpha nor Herman would ever be handed a Nobel Prize for it. They had been right, and being right was not enough, because no one had yet held the light in their hands. When that light finally was measured, years later, the number turned out to be even smaller than they had guessed. Not 5 degrees above absolute zero, but 2.725 degrees. Colder still, a warmth so close to the absolute floor of cold that it is a wonder anything could be built sensitive enough to feel it. And yet it is real, and it is measured, and it is one of the most precisely known numbers in all of science. 2.725 degrees. That is the temperature of the beginning, as it stands tonight, after cooling for the entire age of the universe. Let that rest in the dark with you. Not a figure in a textbook, but the present temperature of the oldest light there is. The light that was streaming before the first star, before the first atom finished forming, before there was anything at all to see. That warmth filled the universe when the universe was young, and it has been thinning and dimming across 13.8 billion years, and it never left. It is not out there, it is here. It is in the space above your bed, and the space between your hands, and the space inside your own quiet chest. The same faint 2.725 degrees, everywhere, evenly, always. And this is the thing that turns the whole story over. The physicists of 1948 had the number. Long before them, Tolman had the reason the number could survive. But none of them, standing in their warm rooms with their pencils, could answer the simplest question a child might ask. If this light is everywhere, if it fills every room and passes through every body and drowns the entire sky in a glow older than the stars, then why, in the name of everything, can we not see it? Why is the brightest event that has ever happened the one thing the human eye was built never to notice? The fire that lit the first morning of the universe never went out. It only cooled and stretched and hid until the most enormous light that has ever existed became the single thing your eyes can never find. The answer is not that the light grew tired. Light does not grow tired. A single ray, once set free, will travel for as long as the universe allows it, and nothing has ever stopped this one. The answer is not that the fire burned out, because the fire has not burned out. It is still arriving, this very second, on the skin of your forearm, on the closed lids of your eyes. No, the reason you cannot see the oldest light there has almost nothing to do with the light at all. The light did not change. What changed was the space it had to cross. And as that space grew, it took hold of the light and drew it out longer and longer, the way a rising tide draws a slack rope taut, until every colour the light once carried had been pulled clean out of the narrow range your eyes were built to read. To feel why, you have to set down a picture you have carried your whole life without ever noticing you were carrying it. You think of space as a room, a fixed, dark, empty room, with the stars hung inside it like lamps on a wall. But space is not a room. Space is a fabric, and it does not sit still. For 13.8 billion years it has been swelling, softly, in every direction at once, with no centre for it to swell away from, and no wall for it to swell toward. It is not that the galaxies are flying apart through space, like debris thrown outward from a blast. It is that the space between them is quietly lengthening, everywhere, all the time, even now, even in the small dark distance between your bed and the ceiling above it, though there the growth is far too gentle for anyone to ever feel. Now picture a single wave of light set loose inside that swelling fabric. Draw the wave on the surface of something soft, a sheet being pulled slowly wider by unseen hands. As the sheet stretches, the wave drawn upon it has no choice. It must stretch with it. Its crests slide apart, its rhythm slows. It does not lose any of its truth. It only grows, in step with everything around it, because the very thing it is riding on is growing beneath it. This is the whole secret. This is the entire reason the first light is dark to you. It has been riding an expanding thing for the full age of the universe, and so it has been lengthening for the full age of the universe, gently, without a single pause, the way you have been breathing all this while without ever counting the breaths. You have heard a smaller cousin of this before, with your ears rather than your eyes. A siren passing on a far road, dropping in pitch as it moves away from you, the sound stretched lower and lower by the widening distance, though the siren itself never changed its note. Light does the very same thing. As the space between a source and an eye grows, the waves of light are drawn toward the long, low red end of things, then past red, then past the last color there is. Astronomers have a plain word for this drawing out. They call it redshift, because for ordinary starlight the color slides toward red. But the oldest light has been shifted so far past red that no word for color could ever hold it. And we can say exactly how far. When the light was released, in that first clearing of the fog, its brightest wavelength measured about 970 nanometers. That itself is a quiet and surprising fact, because 970 nanometers is already just past the reddest red your eye can hold. Even at the moment of its birth, the glow of the young universe burned a shade too deep for human sight, sitting just over the edge, in the near infrared. But that was only the beginning of its hiding. Since that moment, the expansion of the universe has stretched every one of those waves by a factor of 1089. 1089 times longer than they began. Let that number rest a moment, the way you would rest a heavy stone on the ground. Every wave in the oldest light has been pulled to more than 1,000 times the length it had when it left. Stretch a wave 1,000-fold and you do not merely dim it. You carry it into another country altogether. That brightest wavelength, once 970 nanometers, now measures close to 2 millimeters. It has left the world of light your eye can name and crossed into the world of microwaves, the same broad family of waves that warms food and carries a voice down a telephone line. 2 millimeters. Set against the light you can actually see, which lives in the thin ribbon between 400 and 700 nanometers. The ancient glow is now roughly 4,000 times longer in its wavelength than anything your eyes were ever made to catch. If the light you can see were a ripple the width of a single thread, then this same light today, after its long drawing out, would be a slow swell 4,000 threads across, a wave so broad you could lie down inside the trough of it. Your eye, tuned across your whole life, and across every life that came before you to that one narrow band of thread-fine ripples, has no way to feel a swell so wide. It passes through you unread, not because it is faint, but because it is too large for the small instrument of you to notice. Think, too, of how far it came to reach you this quietly. 13.8 billion years on the road, not 13 years. Not 13,000, 13 billion, and then most of a billion more. Every one of those years a full turn of a world around a star, stacked end on end so deep that the number stops meaning anything the moment you try to hold it. And for that entire crossing, the light was stretching. There was never an hour of it that was not being drawn a little longer, so that what reaches you tonight is not a message that travelled and then arrived unchanged. It is a message that has been slowly, faithfully lengthening for longer than the earth beneath you has existed. There is a soft irony folded into all of this, and it belongs to a quiet man who saw it coming long before anyone found the light. In 1934, the physicist Richard Tolman sat with the mathematics of an expanding universe and worked out something that ought to have felt impossible. He showed that when space stretches light, it does not smear it, or muddy it, or ruin the clean even shape of it. It cools it. It lengthens every wave in the very same faithful proportion. So that light which began as a perfect glow, the pure balanced radiance of something warm, stays a perfect glow as it stretches, only cooler, only softer, only pushed further down the scale toward the invisible. The color leaves. The perfection stays. Tolman proved this on paper 3 decades before a single antenna would ever hear the hiss of the thing itself. He never saw the light. He only saw, in the cold clarity of the equations, that if such a light existed it would still be flawless, and it would be hiding, and it would be cold. And he was right on every single count. So this is the shape of the trick that has been played on your eyes, and it was not played by any hand. Nothing dimmed the first light, nothing hid it on purpose, nothing was ever taken away. The universe simply grew, as it has always grown, and in growing it carried the light along and stretched it past the far edge of everything you are able to see. The way a voice calling across a widening valley drops lower and lower until it slips below the range your ears can hold, though the voice never stopped and never softened and is calling still. Feel where that leaves you, lying here in the dark. The light is not far away. It is not out at the rim of the sky, waiting to be reached by some braver traveller. It is here, in this room, on your face, in the shallow warm space between your palms if you let them rest together. 411 of these ancient waves fill every cubic centimetre of the air above your chest, rising and settling with your breath, and every last one of them is a genuine piece of the fire that lit the universe, and not one of them can find its way into your eye. You are soaked in the oldest light there is. You are lit, head to foot, by the first morning of everything, and you will lie in that light your whole life and never once see it flicker, because it is not too dim for you, and it is not too far for you. It is only too long, stretched across 13 billion patient years into a shape your body was simply never given the means to read. Let that settle without any effort on your part. There is nothing here to hold on to, nothing to keep, no figure you need to carry into the morning. The light will go on arriving whether or not you remember its name or its number. Let your hands loosen. Let the number 1089 drift off the way a wave drifts back off a shore, having done its slow work and asking nothing in return. You are being bathed in something ancient and unhurried, and all that is asked of you is to lie still inside it and let your breathing go long and low. And yet the stretching alone is only half of the reason the sky above you is dark, only half of why a universe drowning from end to end in ancient light should look, to a small creature lying in the dark, like an empty black bowl. Because if the light is truly everywhere, if it fills every room and every valley and every hollow of every living body, then the question does not go quietly away when you answer it. It only sharpens. A cosmos this full of light should not be able to hide it so completely. Something more than a simple lengthening of waves must be at work. Something that can take a universe flooded corner to corner with radiance and make it appear, to the ones living inside it, like almost nothing at all. Something more than a simple lengthening of waves must be at work. And it is. But the second half of the answer hides inside a single word so ordinary you rarely stop to weigh it: time. The dark you are lying beneath tonight is not only a matter of stretched light, it is also a matter of the age of everything, and of how far any light can travel before it runs out of years to travel in. Consider what it would mean for the sky to have an edge. Not an edge in space, not a wall you could drive toward and one day press your palm against. An edge in time. The universe, as far as anyone has been able to measure, has an age. 13.8 billion years, give or take the thinnest sliver, is the whole of it. The entire distance from the first instant to this quiet room and your slow breathing inside it. And light, for all its blinding speed, is not infinitely fast. It has a pace. In 1 year it crosses 1 light year, and not a step more. So when you gaze out into the dark, you are never seeing the sky as it is. You are seeing it as it was. The deeper you look, the further you fall backward into the past. Which means there is a limit to how far the seeing can reach. Somewhere out there, in every direction at once, sits a boundary made not of matter but of time itself. The distance beyond which the light simply has not had the years to arrive. A man named Edgar Allan Poe, better remembered for his ravens and his buried beating hearts, set this idea down in a strange and feverish little essay in the year 1848. He called it Eureka. He had no telescope that could prove it, no equations to lean on, only the ache of a mind that could not let the dark sky alone. And he guessed, correctly, that the night is dark because the universe is young enough that the farthest light has not yet crossed the room. Let that settle for a moment. A poet in the middle of the 19th century, feeling his way toward the shape of a truth it would take another 100 years to confirm. But here is where the two halves of the answer fold together into something stranger than either alone. Because when you follow any line of sight far enough out, far enough back, you do not eventually arrive at emptiness. You arrive at the fog. You reach back to that sealed and glowing plasma from before the light was freed, and you cannot see past it, because before that moment nothing could be seen at all. So the old paradox turns out to have been half right in a way no one expected. Every line of sight really does end on a surface. It just is not the surface of a star. It is the surface of the entire infant universe. The last curtain of that opaque fire, hanging at the far edge of everything you could ever look at. Astronomers have a quiet name for it. The surface of last scattering. Picture it as a vast shell wrapped around you at an unthinkable distance, and know that there is one wrapped around every observer, everywhere. Each of us sitting at the center of our own private sphere of the oldest possible light. When that shell released its glow, it was blazing at roughly 3000 Kelvin, the dull red-orange of a cooling ember, bright enough that if your eyes could have met it unchanged, the whole sky in every direction would have burned like the inside of a furnace. Not one point of brightness here and another there. A seamless, total glare, corner to corner, with no dark anywhere to rest your gaze. And this is the piece that a physicist named Richard Tolman worked out on paper in the year 1934, decades before anyone had seen the glow itself. He showed, with nothing but mathematics, that when a universe expands, it does not simply scatter its light or dim it in some ragged, uneven way. It cools that light gently and evenly, sliding the whole glow down toward colder and longer wavelengths while keeping its shape perfectly intact. The fire does not go out. It is not extinguished. It is carried down, degree by degree, across billions of years, from the ember heat of 3000 Kelvin, all the way to the barest breath above absolute zero. So gather the two halves and hold them together in the dark. The sky is not dark because there is nothing out there. The sky is drowning in that ancient glare, filled edge to edge with the light of the last scattering surface, exactly as bright as the old paradox demanded it should be. Olbers, in his way, was right. Every direction you could point does end on a blazing wall. It is only that the wall has been cooled by the stretching of space from a furnace to a whisper, its light dragged out of the visible and down into the microwave, 1089 times longer than when it left. The universe is not a dark bowl with a few lamps scattered inside it. It is a single, uniform fire, seen through so much time and so much expansion that it is faded, to your particular eyes, into what feels like nothing at all. And notice what the old wrong answers could never touch. It was tempting, for centuries, to say the darkness must come from something in the way, dust and cloud drinking up the distant light before it could reach us. But that answer collapses the moment you press on it, because dust that swallowed that much radiance would not stay cold and dark. It would warm, and warm, until it glowed as fiercely as everything feeding it, and the sky would blaze right through it. Nothing can simply absorb a universe of light and hide it. The only thing that can hide it is time and expansion working quietly together, stretching and cooling the fire until it slips beneath the threshold of a small warm creature's sight, which brings it back, as everything tonight keeps bringing it back, to your own still body in the dark. You are not lying under an empty sky. You are lying at the exact center of that shell of oldest light, with its faint and even glow arriving on you from every direction at once. 411 of its cold photons, resting in every cubic centimeter of the air above your face, passing through you without pressure, without warmth you could ever feel. The last dim heat of the beginning of everything falling on your skin as gently as the dark itself. There is nothing here you need to hold, nothing to solve, only an ancient fire, banked so low across so many years that it has become the very quiet you are drifting down into. And yet knowing where the light came from and why it hides is not the same as knowing how a small and stubborn animal ever managed to catch it. That is a different kind of story, and it does not begin in the sky at all. It begins in a field in New Jersey with a strange and stubborn hiss that two men could not for the life of them make go away. It was the year 1964, and the place was a low green rise of ground in a town called Holmdel in New Jersey, where the roads run quiet and the sky opens wide over the fields. There, on that rise, a telephone company had set down something enormous and strange. It was an antenna shaped like a horn, 6 meters from lip to throat, 20 feet of aluminum flaring open toward the heavens like a great cupped hand held up to listen. And here is the first thing to understand, the thing that makes all the rest of it so quietly astonishing. That horn had not been built to hear the beginning of the universe. No one builds a thing for that. It had been built for something almost ordinary. A few years before, engineers had lifted enormous metal balloons into orbit, shining spheres the size of buildings, and they had bounced radio signals off their skins to carry a human voice from one coast of the country to the other. The horn on the hill was made to catch those faint echoes as they came whispering back down out of the sky. And when the balloons had done their work and were let go, the horn stayed behind on its patch of grass, and 2 young radio astronomers were handed the keys to it. Their names were Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson. They were not hunting for anything grand. They wanted, more than anything, a quiet instrument. They meant to measure the faint radio hum that drifts down from between the stars, the soft glow of our own galaxy. And to do that they needed a receiver so clean, so free of noise, that they could trust every last whisper it gave them. So they set about the patient, unglamorous work of silencing their machine. They wanted the horn to hear nothing at all when it was pointed at nothing. Only then could they believe it when it finally heard something. But the horn would not go quiet. Wherever they aimed it, there was a hiss, a faint, steady static, low and even, sitting underneath everything like the sound of a distant sea you cannot quite place. It was not loud. You could have missed it, if you were the kind of person who missed things. They were not. And the more they listened, the stranger the hiss became, because it broke every rule a signal is supposed to follow. Let me take you gently through what they ruled out, because the ruling out is the whole heart of it. It was not coming from New York City, glittering just over the horizon, because when they turned the horn away from the city, the hiss did not fade. It was not coming from any single star, and not from the sun, because it did not rise and set, did not swing across the sky as the earth turned beneath it. It did not come and go with the day. It did not come and go with the seasons. Spring, summer, the hiss stayed exactly the same, in exactly the same measure, no matter where in the whole vault of the sky they chose to point. And this is the part that should settle over you slowly in the dark. A real source in the heavens has a place. It sits somewhere. You can turn toward it and you can turn away from it. But this sound had no place at all. It came from every direction at once, poured in evenly from the whole bowl of the sky, as though the emptiness itself were faintly warm and softly singing. They measured its strength, and in the language of their instruments that strength came to a temperature, not the temperature of anything you could ever touch, but the temperature a thing would have to be to glow with exactly that much faint radio warmth. The number they found was small, around 3.5 degrees above absolute zero, at a wavelength of 7.35 centimeters, a little more than the width of 3 fingers laid side by side. Now hold what absolute zero really is for a moment before you let it go. It is the coldest cold there can be, the floor beneath all temperature, the point where every last motion stops and there is no heat left anywhere to give. And this hiss sat only 3.5 small steps above that floor. It was a breath of warmth in a universe of frost, almost nothing, the faintest heat imaginable, and it would not go away. So they did what careful people do. They began to take their instrument apart, looking for the flaw that surely had to be hiding somewhere inside it. They suspected the receiver itself, the delicate electronics that can hum with a warmth of their own. So they chilled those electronics down with liquid helium, down to -269 degrees Celsius, so cold that the machine's own faint heat could no longer breathe a false whisper into the measurement. And still the hiss remained, unmoved, patient, exactly as loud as before. They looked then to the horn itself. And here the story turns almost tender, almost absurd, the way the largest things in life so often arrive wearing the smallest clothes. Inside the wide aluminum throat of the antenna, a pair of pigeons had moved in and made a home. They had roosted there, in the great ear pointed at the sky, and they had coated its inner surface with a thin film of droppings, which the two men, being scientists and being polite about it, wrote down in their notes as a white dielectric material. And it was reasonable to wonder. Perhaps this was the answer at last. Perhaps the oldest and evenest whisper they had ever heard was nothing more than the residue of two birds. So they cleared the pigeons out. They cleaned the throat of the horn until it shone. They wiped away every trace of that pale material, and they turned the instrument back to the sky, and they listened. And the hiss was still there. Consider for a moment what it takes to be that stubborn, and how nearly this could have gone another way. If they had been a little more tired, a little more willing to shrug, they might have written the whole thing off as some fault they could not name, and moved on to easier work. If the signal had been just slightly weaker, they might never have trusted it. If it had come from one corner of the sky instead of from all corners, they would have filed it away as a source, given it a place on their charts, and thought no more of it. The very thing that made the hiss impossible to explain, its perfect sameness in every direction, was also the thing that most tempted them to dismiss it, because a signal that comes from everywhere feels less like a message and more like a mistake living inside your own machine. It took a rare kind of stubbornness to keep insisting that the emptiness was real, that the sky itself was warm, that the nothing was quietly and evenly aglow. And so let this be one of those places where you can loosen your hold. There is nothing in this you need to carry with you into the morning. Let the names slip away if they want to slip away. Let the numbers thin out and grow soft. Keep, if you keep anything at all, only the shape of it. Two men on a hill, in the ordinary dark of an ordinary New Jersey night, with a horn that would not stop whispering, cleaning bird droppings out of an antenna in a last and doomed attempt to make the universe be silent. Your shoulders can ease down now. Your breath can lengthen and slow. The story does not need your effort in order to go on, because what they were hearing, though they did not yet know it, was not noise at all. It was not the city, and not the birds, and not the machine. It was the light we have been drifting through together all this while, the light from the day the fog first lifted, arriving on that hill after a journey of nearly 14 billion years, so stretched and cooled by the long expansion of everything that it no longer looked like light at all. It had become a hiss. The most ancient thing there is, the banked fire of the very beginning, was falling onto a metal horn in a quiet field and registering, to two puzzled men, as a faint and stubborn static they were desperate to erase. They had caught it, without meaning to, without believing it, without a name for it yet. They had caught the oldest light in the universe, the afterglow of the first moment, the thing that a handful of theorists had once wondered about, and that most of the world had long since half forgotten. It was pouring into their instrument in the very same measure it is pouring through you now, those same faint photons resting in the air above your face, and they had spent long months trying to make it stop. They did not know that only a short drive away, at a university in Princeton, another small group of physicists had been quietly building an instrument of their own for the single purpose of finding exactly this, and were, at that very hour, closing in on the answer from the other side. But that is the turn the story takes next, and it is a stranger turn than you might expect, because the truth about that stubborn hiss had already been written down, years before, by people who were not even listening for it, and then set gently aside, and very nearly lost. For years before that spring, a physicist named Robert Dicke, working at Princeton, had been holding a single idea gently in his mind and refusing to let it go. He had reasoned that if the universe truly began in a state of enormous heat and density, then some faint trace of that heat ought to remain, thinned across all the intervening time, cooled almost to nothing, but never quite erased. Not the memory of a fire. The fire itself, gone cold. And so he had gathered a few younger colleagues around him, and set them to building a small antenna of their own, a modest instrument by the measure of the great observatories, tuned to listen for precisely the sort of faint warmth that two other men, a short drive away, were at that very moment straining to scrub out of their readings and throw away. Neither team knew the other existed. Let that settle for a moment, here in the dark, because it is one of the quiet marvels of the whole story. In one low building in Holmdel, two careful men were treating the oldest light in creation as a nuisance, a hiss, a fault in the wiring they could not name and could not silence. In another building, only a few miles up the road, a second group was patiently assembling the very machine meant to go hunting for that same hiss on purpose, convinced it had to be out there somewhere in the sky, and entirely unaware that it had already arrived, already been caught, already been mistaken for the leavings of two birds. Two groups of physicists, standing on opposite banks of the same discovery, and not one of them able to see across to the other. You do not need to hold the names, let them drift by. What matters is the shape of it, and the shape of it is almost unbearably delicate. Consider how easily it might have gone otherwise. If Penzias and Wilson had been a little less stubborn, a little more willing to accept a small unexplained warmth in a machine built for other work, they would have written it off, filed it away, and moved on to the job they were paid to do, and the light would have gone on pouring through them unremarked. If Dick and his young colleagues had finished their instrument a single season sooner, they would have found the glow first, from the other direction, and the story would now carry entirely different names. If the horn antenna in Holmdel had been pointed a few degrees differently, or tuned to a slightly different band, or if the pigeons had never roosted there at all to send those two men climbing after every last source of noise, the discovery might have waited years longer, or slipped past that whole generation altogether. And here is the layer beneath that one, the deeper thing that makes even this remarkable near miss feel small. The answer these men were circling had already been written down, not guessed at vaguely, written in numbers, in the plain language of physics, and then quietly set aside and forgotten. Go back 16 years, to 1948. Two physicists, Ralph Alpher and Robert Herman, working from the young idea that the universe had begun hot and dense, followed the mathematics forward through all the cooling and the stretching, and arrived at a prediction so specific it should have stopped the world. They calculated that the leftover glow of that beginning should still be here, all around us, at a temperature of only about 5 degrees above absolute zero. 5 degrees. 16 years before anyone stumbled onto the real thing at 3.5 degrees, two men had sat with pencil and paper and named, very nearly exactly, the temperature of the oldest light in the universe. George Gamow, who had helped shape the theory they were building upon, was part of that same small circle of thinkers. Rest on that number for a moment. 5 degrees, written down in 1948. 3.5 degrees, measured in 1964. A prediction and a discovery, 17 years apart, agreeing almost perfectly, made by people who never worked together and, for the longest time, never knew how close they had come to touching hands across those years. The universe had, in a sense, told someone the answer. Someone had listened, and worked it out, and written it plainly, and then the answer had been shelved, treated as a curiosity, an idea too strange and too hard to test, and it drifted quietly out of the conversation until almost no one remembered it was there. And even this is not the bottom of it. Go back further still, another 14 years, to 1934. A physicist named Richard Tolman had already proven something essential with mathematics alone, long before there was any thought of building a machine to look. He had shown that as the universe expands, it cools the radiation inside it, but it does so with a strange gentleness. It stretches the light, drains its warmth, and yet it preserves, perfectly, the particular shape of that light, the smooth signature of heat that physicists call a black body. The expanding universe, Tolman showed, does not smear or corrupt the glow it calls. It carries it down through the ages intact, faithful, unmistakable, so that whoever finally caught it, decades later, would be able to look at its shape and know exactly what it was and where it had come from. Think of what that means, lying here in the quiet. 30 years before two men in New Jersey argued with their instrument, the groundwork had been laid. The mathematics that guaranteed the light would survive its long fall. The prediction of nearly the right temperature. All of it sitting in journals, in libraries, in the pages of papers that fewer and fewer people ever opened. The truth about that stubborn hiss was not waiting to be invented. It was only waiting to be remembered, and measured against the light itself. All of this human forgetting is nothing at all. The glow those men were arguing over had been travelling for 13.8 billion years to reach that horn antenna. It had crossed almost the entire history of the universe to arrive at exactly that spot on exactly that morning. A prediction lost for 16 years, a proof overlooked for 30, two teams missing each other by a few miles and a few months. On the scale of the light, these are less than the blink you just made, less than the slow breath you are taking now. The universe had been patient with its secret for an unimaginable span, and it could afford to wait a little longer for the last few pieces of human attention to fall, at last, into place. So the stage was set, though none of them yet knew it. Two men in Holmdel with a signal they could not kill. A group in Princeton with a machine built to find it. A prediction gathering dust in a paper from 1948. A proof older still, quietly correct, quietly waiting. All of it converging, without a sound, toward a single afternoon and a single telephone call that would draw every loose thread together at once and change what the whole of humanity believed about where everything came from. And the way those threads finally met is the strangest part of all. The call came in the middle of an ordinary week, from one town in New Jersey to another, the two of them less than an hour's drive apart. Arno Penzias had been handed a name and a number by someone who knew someone, a passing remark at a dinner, a rumor that a group of physicists at Princeton had been thinking hard about exactly the kind of radiation he could not get rid of. So he picked up the telephone, not because he believed it would explain anything, because he had simply run out of other things to try. He described the hiss. He described the temperature that would not fall, the antenna they had scrubbed clean, the receiver they had chilled to within a few degrees of the coldest thing there is. And on the other end of the line, Robert Dick listened, and went very quiet, and when at last he set the receiver back down, he turned to a room full of his own students, the ones who had been quietly building their own instrument to hunt for precisely this, and told them, in words the story has softened in the retelling, that someone else had reached it first. That is the moment everything had been converging toward. Not a discovery shouted across a laboratory, not a cry of triumph in the dark. A phone call between two small towns, one man describing a problem he could not solve, another man recognizing, with a slow sinking certainty, the answer he had been about to reach himself. The oldest light in all of creation did not announce itself. It did not arrive with any fanfare at all. It arrived as a nuisance. It arrived as a faint and stubborn warmth in a machine, a thing two men had spent the better part of a year trying to make go away. And you can let that settle for a moment, the way it settles in me. The single most important measurement in the history of our understanding of the universe began as an annoyance somebody wanted to delete, because that is the part most people get backward, and it is worth slowing down to turn it over properly. We tend to imagine great discoveries as the reward for great searching. A question asked, a telescope aimed, a patient watcher rewarded at last for looking in the right place at the right time. But this was not that. Penzias and Wilson were not looking for the beginning of the universe. They had no interest in it. They were radio engineers with a very good antenna and a very practical goal. And this signal was the thing standing in their way. They wanted a clean measurement of the quiet sky, and something kept whispering into every reading, from every direction, and they wanted it gone. So understand what actually happened here. The afterglow of the Big Bang was not found by someone hunting for it. It was found by two people trying to throw it out. And so they set about eliminating it. The way you would track down any unwanted hum, not a flaw in the wiring, they decided, after checking the wiring. Not the heat of their own equipment, because they had cooled the receiver down to -269 degrees Celsius with liquid helium, so cold that the machine itself could no longer be the source of any warmth. Not the great glow of New York City sitting just over the horizon, because when they aimed away from the city the hiss did not fade. Not the atmosphere, because it did not thicken toward the ground or thin toward the top of the sky the way ordinary airborne noise would. One by one, the obvious answers fell away. And then there were the pigeons. A pair of them had roosted inside the wide throat of the horn antenna, and left behind what Penzias and Wilson, with the flat humour of frustrated engineers, wrote down in their notes as a white dielectric material. It seemed almost too simple. Perhaps the birds were the whole problem. Perhaps this coating was catching the warmth of the day and radiating it back into the receiver. So they removed the pigeons. They cleaned the antenna out completely. They climbed inside that 6-meter throat, that 20-foot horn built years earlier to catch signals bounced off the Echo balloon satellites. And they scoured it clean. And they went back to listening. And the hiss was exactly, precisely, maddeningly the same. 4.2 degrees of excess warmth, coming from nowhere they could point to and everywhere they could aim. Sit with the strangeness of that for a breath. They had subtracted the machine. They had subtracted the city, the ground, the air, the birds. They had taken away everything local, everything nearby, everything that belonged to the Earth or to their own instrument. And when all of it was gone, the signal was not gone. What remained, once every earthly explanation had been stripped out, was not a fault in the antenna. It was the sky itself. Not something in front of the sky. The sky. Here is where the ground shifts beneath the whole story, and you can feel it shift, softly, without needing to hold on. Because the most telling thing about that stubborn hiss was not its warmth, it was its sameness. The signal did not grow brighter when they turned toward the crowded heart of the galaxy, and it did not dim when they turned toward the emptiest, loneliest patch of dark. It did not rise by day and fall by night. It did not swell in one season and shrink in another. It was uniform. It came pouring in from every direction they could choose, at the very same faint temperature, matched across the entire sphere of the sky to about 1 part in 25,000. And a signal that comes from everywhere at once, evenly, endlessly, is telling you something that the mind resists at first. It is telling you there is no source, not a star, not a cloud, not a distant furnace burning somewhere out beyond the last galaxies. There was nothing out there generating it, because it was not coming from a place. It was coming from all places. It was not a thing in the universe. It was the condition of the universe. And this is where nearly every word we reach for to describe it quietly betrays us, and it is worth demolishing those words gently, one at a time, because they shape how you picture the thing even now. We call it an echo, but an echo is a sound that leaves you, travels out, strikes something far away, and comes back thinned and late. This does not come back from anywhere. We call it an afterglow, as though it were the dimming ember of a fire that burned somewhere behind us and is now cooling in the distance. But it is not behind us in the way a memory is behind us. We call it the oldest light, and imagine it as something far away and long ago, a faint gleam from the edge of things that had to cross an enormous gulf to reach us. And that picture, comforting as it is not quite the truth either. Because the light is not far away. The light is here. It is in this room. It has been passing through you this entire time. So let the old picture loosen. Not a distant beacon you are receiving from across the void. Not a message sent long ago from somewhere far off. Something closer and stranger than either of those. Every one of those 411 ancient photons in each cubic centimeter around you, streaming through the walls, through the air, through the blanket over you and the bones of your hand, is a piece of that same first light. You are not looking out at the afterglow. You are sitting inside it. You always have been. The fire did not burn somewhere else and leave a fading glow behind. The fire filled everything, and everything is still faintly warm with it, including the small warm space where you are lying now. And that reframes the accident entirely. Because Penzias and Wilson were not in the end catching a whisper from the far side of the cosmos. They were the first two human beings to notice the thing that had been all around them, and around everyone who had ever lived, and around every listener who ever fell asleep under any sky, since the very beginning. It had been in Kepler's study. It had been in Olbers' night. It had been in the horn of the antenna before the pigeons ever arrived, and it was in the pigeons too, and in the droppings they scrubbed away, and in the liquid helium and the cold receiver, and their own two bodies climbing inside the metal to clean it. There was never any escaping it. There was no direction to aim that would have been free of it. They could not delete the signal because the signal was not an intruder in their measurement. It was the room the measurement was taking place in. That is the pivot the whole strange convergence had been carrying you toward. Not a light we found. A light we finally noticed we were standing in, not a distant past we glimpsed, a present we had been immersed in without knowing. And once you understand that the ancient fireball did not fade away behind us, but simply expanded until it became the very medium we live inside, a quieter and heavier question opens beneath the first one. If this light truly is everywhere, if it truly is here, filling the space between every atom in your body right now, then the darkness you have taken for granted your whole life, the plain black of the night ceiling above you, was never really darkness at all. It was only a darkness your eyes were built too narrow to see through. And what that narrowness has been hiding from you all along is the next thing worth understanding. For most of human history, the darkness overhead was simply where the world stopped. You looked up, you saw a scattering of stars on a field of black, and the black was just the absence of anything to see. Nobody thought to interrogate it. The dark was the canvas. The stars were the paint, and a canvas, after all, asks no questions of you. But a small number of people, spread thin across 400 years, could not leave it alone. The first of them was a German mathematician named Johannes Kepler, and the year was 1610. Kepler was not trying to solve a paradox. He was trying to argue that the universe must be finite, that it must have an edge, and he reached for the night sky as his proof. Because if the universe went on forever, he reasoned, and if it were filled evenly with stars in every direction, then something very strange would have to be true. Follow the thought slowly, because it is worth holding. Imagine standing in the center of an endless forest. Look in any single direction. Your line of sight might slip past the nearest trunk and the next, but if the forest truly has no end, then sooner or later, along that one line, your eye must land on bark. There is no gap that stays a gap forever. Every direction eventually finds a tree. Now trade the trees for stars, and the forest for the cosmos. In an infinite universe packed with suns, every single line you could draw outward from your eye, every possible direction, should eventually come to rest on the burning surface of a star. Not most directions, all of them, which means the whole sky, edge to edge, corner to corner, should blaze with the brightness of the sun's own face. There should be no night. There should be no black between the stars. The darkness you are lying under right now should not exist at all, and yet it does. That contradiction is what came to carry another man's name. In 1823, a German physician and astronomer named Heinrich Wilhelm Olbers wrote the puzzle down formally, and the riddle has been called Olbers' paradox ever since, though he was far from the first to feel its weight. Thomas Digges circled it back in the 1500s. Edmund Halley, the man of the comet, turned it over in the 1700s. So did a Swiss astronomer named Jean-Philippe Loy de Chezeaux. For more than 2 centuries, some of the sharpest minds alive kept arriving at the same quiet impossibility. If the universe is vast and old and full of light, why is the night sky dark? Here is where you meet the wrong answer, the comfortable answer, the one that feels obvious and is not. Olbers himself reached for it. He proposed that the space between the stars must be filled with dust and dark clouds, and that this dust simply drinks the light of the far-off stars before it can reach us. It is a tidy idea. It is the idea your own instinct would offer if you had never been told otherwise. And it is wrong. Completely and quietly wrong, for a reason that only becomes clear when you sit with it, because dust that absorbs light does not stay dark. Not for long. Pour enough starlight into a cloud of dust for long enough, and the dust warms. It heats. It climbs toward the very temperature of the light falling on it, until at last it glows with exactly the same brightness it was supposed to be hiding. Absorption is not a solution. It is only a delay. A shield that swallows fire does not stay a shield. It becomes a second fire. So the dust cannot save the paradox. Something else has to. And this is the pivot inside the pivot, the place where the whole shape of the question turns over in your hands. The darkness was never explained by what stands between you and the stars. Not the dust, not the distance, not some absence out in the void. The darkness is explained by two things far stranger, and you have already met both of them tonight. The earliest glimpse of the true answer came not from an astronomer at all, but from a poet. In 1848, ailing and half forgotten, Edgar Allan Poe wrote a strange, sprawling prose poem he called Eureka, and folded inside it was the shape of the resolution. The reason the sky is dark, he suggested, is that the light from the most distant places has simply not yet had time to arrive. He had no equations. He had no instrument that could prove it. He had only the intuition that the universe might be young enough for its farthest edges to still be on their way to us. And in that, he was right. Because the first of the two answers is time. The universe is not infinitely old. It is, as far as anyone can measure, 13.8 billion years old. And that number is not merely a fact about the past. It is a fence around what you are allowed to see. Light is fast, but it is not instant, and in 13.8 billion years even light can only travel so far. So the stars whose light has simply not had time to reach you might as well not be there at all, not for your eyes tonight. Every line of sight does still end on something, but that something is not always a nearby star. Push far enough out along any direction, past the last galaxy you could ever hope to see, and your line of sight does not run out of universe. It runs into the fire itself. It ends on the wall of the young cosmos, on the light released the day everything turned transparent, which means the forest is real after all. Every direction does end on a burning surface. Olbers was right about the sky being full. He was only wrong about what fills it. The night sky is not empty. It is not dark. Every point of it, every last sliver of what looks like plain black above your bed, is glowing with the light of the beginning. The whole ceiling of the world is on fire. You simply cannot see the color of the flame, because the second thing that saves the paradox is the stretch. This is the piece a physicist named Richard Tolman worked out on paper back in 1934, years before anyone knew it would matter. The same expansion that carries the galaxies apart also pulls on the light traveling between them, drawing each wave longer and longer across the eons. And so the fire that fills the sky, the oldest light of all, has been stretched more than 1,000 times over, 1,089 times to be exact, dragged down out of the range your eyes were built to catch, and into the long, cool, invisible band of the microwave. The sky is not dark because it holds no light. The sky is dark because its light hums in a key your eyes were never given ears for. Let that undo something in you, gently. There is nothing here to hold on to, nothing you need to keep. But notice what has quietly happened, a question that 400 years of brilliant people could not put down, a question that felt like a flaw in the cosmos, a hole where light should be, turns out not to be a hole at all. It is a disguise. The blackness above you is a full sky wearing a color you cannot read. Not an emptiness. A crowd. Not the end of the light, but the light grown too old and too stretched to reach the narrow doorway of the human eye. And once the darkness stops being darkness, once you understand that you have spent every night of your life lying beneath a sky that is quietly ablaze from one horizon to the other, in a light you are simply built to miss, the question does not close. It sinks. It goes down another level. Because if your eyes are that narrow, if the plainest fact of the night, its very blackness, was hiding the largest fire in existence, then it is fair to wonder what else that same narrowness has been keeping from you. What else is here, in this room, in this body, streaming through the space between the words you are hearing, that you have no window for? That is not a place to arrive. It is a doorway to step through, and it is the one we open next. Step through then, slowly. Nothing on the other side of that doorway can touch you, and there is no hurry in any of this, so let your hands stay where they are, and let the crossing happen in the space of a single easy breath. The doorway is only a change in what you are willing to notice. You have already made the hardest part of the passage. You have already accepted that the black ceiling above you is not black, that the dark is a crowd, that the plainest thing your eyes report to you every single night is a mistake of range and not a truth about the world. Once that is real to you, the rest follows quietly, the way one loosened thread pulls the next. Here is what waits on the other side. The ancient fire is not the only light you cannot see. It is only the oldest. It is the first and the largest of a whole family of glows that fill this room and pass through you unfelt. And now that your eyes have been named as the narrow window they are, the others begin to step forward one by one. Consider the light of the stars themselves, not the handful you can pick out on a clear night. All of them. Every star that has ever ignited anywhere, in any galaxy, across the whole 13.8 billion years the universe has been burning. Every one of those stars poured light into space, and most of that light never landed on anything. It is still traveling. It is still here. Astronomers have a plain name for the sum of it. The pooled radiance of every star and every galaxy, and every grain of glowing dust across all of cosmic history. And when they add it all together, when they measure the faint combined shine of the entire history of fire in the universe, they find that it too sits almost entirely outside the reach of the human eye. It arrives in two soft tides. One of them lies close to the light you can almost see, in the optical and the near infrared, and that is the direct light of the stars, the raw shine of burning things caught in the act. The other lies further out, deeper into the infrared, colder and slower, and that is stranger. That is starlight that was swallowed. Stars are born inside enormous clouds of dust, and much of the light they make never escapes cleanly. The dust drinks it. The dust warms. And then the dust lets the light go again, but changed, released at a longer and lazier wavelength, the color of something cooling in the dark. So the second tide is not the stars speaking directly. It is the stars remembered by the dust that stood in front of them, an echo of fire handed on at a lower pitch. Two glows, one direct, one absorbed and returned, both of them woven through the space around you at this moment, and you, lying still, built to catch a slender ribbon between roughly 400 and 700 nanometers, receive not one flicker of either. Let that settle before you carry it any further. You do not have to hold it tightly. You are not being asked to memorize the two tides or the names of the bands. You are only being asked to feel, softly and without alarm, the shape of what is happening in the air above your bed. The whole burning history of the universe is passing through this room, and you are simply not given the instrument to notice. Now go down another step, because there is a number here, and this is the one that tends to quietly rearrange a person. You have already met the count of the oldest light, 411 of those ancient photons in every cubic centimeter of space, everywhere, always, the same in the emptiest gulf between galaxies as inside the pillow beneath your head. You have already heard that they outnumber every other photon in the universe by something like 400 to 1. But set that light beside the matter of the universe, beside the actual stuff, the protons and the neutrons, the atoms that make stars and planets and the body you are lying in, and the ratio grows almost cruel in its lopsidedness. For every single particle of ordinary matter in the entire observable universe, for every proton, every neutron, every scrap of the material that everything solid is built from, there are roughly 1 billion photons of that ancient light. 1 billion to 1. Sit inside that for a moment. Everything you have ever called a thing, every stone, every ocean, every mountain, every living creature that has ever drawn breath, all of it is drawn from the one part, and the billion is the light. By simple count, the universe is not mostly matter with a little light mixed in. It is overwhelmingly, staggeringly, a thing made of light, with matter as the rare exception, the trace impurity, the 1 grain in 1 billion. And almost every one of those billion grains of light is a grain your eyes will never register. So the tally of the invisible keeps climbing. Not the emptiness of space, but its fullness, kept from you. Not a poverty of light, but a flood of it, in colors you cannot read. Not one hidden glow, but layer upon layer of them. The oldest fire, the pooled shine of every star, the light the dust drank and gave back, all of it stacked in the same dark room, all of it streaming through the same still body, none of it landing anywhere your mind can find. The longer you look at the arithmetic, the more the ordinary word for what is above you, darkness, comes apart in your hands. There is almost nothing dark about it. There is only you, and the width of the slit you are issued to see through. And then there is deep time, which is the last and quietest turn of this particular screw, and the one that opens onto everything the next stretch of the night will hold. The ancient light was not always cold. This is the part that is easy to forget when you meet it at its present temperature, resting at 2.725 degrees above absolute zero, the most perfectly even glow ever found in nature, the same in every direction to within 1 part in 25,000. It sounds, at that number, like something that has always been faint and frozen, a permanent chill. It was not. On the day it was set free, in the great opening 13.8 billion years ago, it was not a whisper of microwave. It was heat. The gas it broke away from was near 3,000 degrees, glowing, the color of a dull furnace, and the light that left in that instant left as a genuine shine, sitting near the edge of the near-infrared, a warmth that a creature standing in it would have felt on its skin like the side of an open kiln. And in all the time since, it has been cooling. Not because it lost energy to anything, not because it struck cold dust or bled warmth into empty space, but because space itself has been stretching the entire way, opening out beneath the light like a sheet pulled slowly wider, and every wave riding across that widening sheet has been drawn longer with it. The stretch you have already met, that great factor of a bit more than 1,000, the wavelengths pulled out 1,089 times over, is exactly the story of that cooling written in a single ratio. A furnace glow at 3,000 degrees, drawn out across 13.8 billion years of expansion, arrives at your ceiling tonight as a chill barely a few degrees above the absolute floor of cold. There was a man who saw this coming long before anyone had found the light to measure it. In 1934, the physicist Richard Tolman worked out, on paper, with nothing but mathematics, what an expanding universe would do to a glow like this. And what he showed is the detail that makes the whole thing so strange to sit with. The expansion cools the light, yes. It drops its temperature, lengthens its waves, drains its warmth toward the cold. But it does not spoil it. It does not smear the light or muddy its shape. A perfect glow going in stays a perfect glow coming out, only colder, only redder, the entire even spectrum sliding downward together in flawless order, holding its form the whole way down. The universe took a furnace, turned the temperature down across the age of everything, and did not so much as ruffle the shape of the fire while it did it. That perfection, kept intact across 13 billion years of stretching, is the single cleanest fingerprint the beginning ever left, and Tolman knew it had to be true before there was a single instrument on Earth that could go and look. And that same expansion has not stopped. The sheet is still opening. The waves are still lengthening. As far as anyone can tell, the arithmetic Tolman set down runs on without an ending, and the ancient light, already so faint, so stretched, so far past the doorway of your eye, is even now drifting a fraction colder, a fraction longer, sinking by imperceptible degrees toward a chill it will not reach for spans of time that make 13 billion years feel like the blink you just took. You are lying in the warmest, brightest hour this light will ever have again. Every night that has ever passed over any sleeper, it was a shade warmer than tonight. Every night that ever will pass, it will be a shade colder. And none of it, not the warmth it began with, not the cold it is bending toward, was ever built to reach you. Let your breathing go slow here. There is nothing in any of this you need to carry. The light was cooling for billions of years before you were born, and it will keep cooling long after. Without your attention, without your grief, without asking anything of you at all, you can let it pass. But hold, gently, this one thread as we go lower still, because it is the thread that everything left in the night will be tied to. The narrowness was never only in your eyes. It runs deeper than sight, and what it has been keeping from you, underneath even the light, is the layer we go to now. Underneath the light there is a counting, and the counting does not flatter you. Think of the room around you, the air resting on your skin, the walls holding the dark in place, the weight of your own body, settled now into the bed. Every solid thing you can name is made of matter, of protons and neutrons, the small heavy pieces that build anything you could ever hold. And here is the number that lives beneath the light. For every one of those heavy pieces, anywhere in the whole universe, there are close to 1 billion of the ancient photons. 1 billion to 1. Not a slight majority, not a comfortable lead, 1,000 million grains of that cold, invisible light for every single grain of matter that exists. Rest on that a moment. Let it be large without being loud, because it turns the ordinary picture quietly inside out. You move through your days believing you live in a world of things. Solid, countable things. A cup, a door, a warm hand, and matter feels like the main event, the substance the universe is mostly built from, with a little light thrown across the top of it. But that is not the true inventory. By sheer number, the universe is overwhelmingly this ancient radiation, and matter, all of it, every atom in every star, is the rare exception. Not the rule, the remainder. The small leftover that the first fire did not spend. You are made of the leftover. That is not a wound. It is only true, and you can hold it lightly. And it reaches further down still, because even the matter is not what you were taught to see. Take everything the universe is made of, the whole of it, and weigh it out. The part you would call ordinary, the part that forms atoms and bodies and planets and stars, the part that gives off the light you can see and the light you cannot, is only 4.9% of the total. Fewer than 5 pieces in every 100. The rest is stranger. Roughly 26.8% is dark matter, something that has weight and pulls on galaxies but touches no light at all. And roughly 68.3% is dark energy, a pressure woven into empty space that is quietly pushing the whole universe wider apart, and which almost no one can say they truly understand. So let the negatives stack, gently, one upon the other, the way the night stacks its hours over a sleeper. You cannot see the most abundant light there is, because it has been stretched 1,089 times, far past the narrow window your eyes were given. That was the first layer. Then, beneath it, the light you cannot see outnumbers the matter you can by 1 billion to 1, so that the solid world you trust is the thinnest froth on an ocean of invisible glow. That was the second. And now the third. Even that froth of matter, the atoms, the leftover, is fewer than 5 parts in 100 of all that exists. and the other 95 parts are dark to every instrument ever built. Not dim, not distant, dark, present everywhere, and unseen everywhere, right through the middle of the room you are lying in. This is what everyday life keeps from you, softly, so you can go on making tea and locking doors. The world hands you a picture of solid things in bright light, and the picture is almost entirely wrong. Not a little wrong. Wrong at the root. The real universe is mostly light you cannot register, wrapped around matter you mostly cannot see, drifting apart on an energy no one can name, and your senses, kind as they are, were never built to show you any of it. They were built to find the edge of a cliff, and the shape of a face, and the ripeness of fruit. They were built for a body on a warm world, not for the accounting of everything. There is no failure in that. A pair of eyes is a small and beautiful instrument for living. It was simply never an instrument for truth on this scale. Feel, if you can, how much larger the missing part is than the part you were given. You have spent your whole life inside 4.9% and called it the world. Every sunrise you have ever watched, every face you have ever loved, every object you have ever picked up and set down, has been drawn from that thin 5%, and lit by a sliver of light so narrow that the oldest, most abundant glow in existence slides straight through it and past you, unfelt. And beneath that sliver, the billion to one. And beneath that, the dark 95, layer under layer under layer, each one wider and quieter than the last, each one always here, always passing through, always just below the reach of the body that carries you. Let your shoulders go soft again now. This is the highest and coldest air we will breathe tonight, and you do not have to climb any further than this. None of these layers asks anything of you. The billion photons for every atom were streaming before there was an Earth to stream toward, and they will keep streaming when there is no one left to be missed by them. The dark matter that outweighs every star has been pulling galaxies into shape for 13.8 billion years without ever once needing to be noticed. The dark energy widening the sky tonight will go on widening it whether you sleep soundly or lie awake. You are allowed to let all of it pass through you the way it always has, the way it is doing this very second, without holding a single part of it. But keep, gently, one last thread, because it is the one the whole night has been reaching toward. Everything we have found so far has been a kind of absence. Light too stretched to see, matter too outnumbered to matter, substance too dark to shine. 3 layers of the unseen, each one real, each one everywhere. And you might think, having come this far down, that we have reached the bottom of what is hidden, that the last layer is simply the largest darkness. It is not, because there is one more thing folded inside this cold and ancient glow, and it is not an absence at all. It is a presence. Something the invisible light is carrying, faithfully, across the entire age of the universe. Something written into it at the very beginning, and never erased. Not the cold, not the count, not the dark, something quieter than all 3, and far older, waiting underneath even this. That is where we go now, into the last and deepest layer of the night, the one all the others have only been covering. Stay with me, softly, as we go down to it. For 13.8 billion years, this light has stayed almost perfectly the same in every direction you could ever turn to face. Look up, toward the ceiling above you. Look down, through the floor, through the rock, through the far side of the whole planet. Look toward the place where you were born, and then toward the farthest place there is. The glow answers back with the same cold number every time. 2.725 degrees above the coldest cold that can exist. It is so even, so unbroken from one edge of the sky to the other, that for a long time it seemed to be nothing at all but sameness. A wall of identical warmth wrapped around everything, the most featureless surface in creation. And that smoothness is real. It is not a story. Measured across the entire sky, The temperature of this ancient light holds steady to about 1 part in 25,000. Rest on that for a moment, softly, without reaching after it too hard. It means that if you could take the warmth of the sky directly above your room, and the warmth of the sky on the far side of the Earth, and the warmth of the sky on the far side of the galaxy, and lay all of them down side by side, they would match. Not roughly, not closely, almost exactly. It is the most even glow ever found anywhere in nature, the most perfect thing of its kind that anyone has ever measured. For a long while, that perfection was all we could see in it. A universe that seemed, at its deepest level, to be simply and eternally the same, but almost is the whole of it. Almost is where the presence lives, because the light is not perfectly smooth. It never was. Folded into that enormous sameness there is a faint unevenness, a hush of difference, places where the glow runs the tiniest fraction warmer, and places where it runs the tiniest fraction cooler. And when I say tiny, I need you to feel just how tiny, because the number is easy to say and almost impossible to hold in the hand. The difference between the warm places and the cool places is about 100,000th of a single degree. Not 1 degree, not 1/10 of a degree, 100,000th of one. Let that be small for you. You do not need to grip it. If it were a sound, it would be quieter than your own breathing right now. If the whole warmth of this light were the length of your body lying there in the dark, the difference we are talking about would be thinner than a single strand of your hair. It is a variation so slight that for decades no instrument on Earth could feel it at all. The light looked flawless, and only when we built machines cold enough and patient enough to listen underneath the sameness, did the pattern finally surface, like faint handwriting rising through paper. And that is the moment everything changes. Because those almost invisible differences are not noise, they are not flaws in the measurement, they are not static or error or the trembling of the machine, they are the oldest pattern that exists. They are a presence. Here is what they are. Long ago, when the whole universe was still that hot fog we walked through together earlier tonight, the matter inside it was not spread perfectly evenly. In some places it was gathered a little more thickly, in others it was drawn a little more thin, not by much, by 100,000th, but it was enough. And when the fog finally cleared and the light was set free to travel, it carried the print of that unevenness with it. The slightly denser places were slightly warmer, the slightly emptier places were slightly cooler, and that difference has been riding inside the light ever since, unerased, unchanged, all the way to the ceiling above your bed. So the coldest, oldest, faintest glow in the universe is not featureless after all. It is a map. It is the single oldest picture of anything that has ever been taken. A photograph of how the matter of the whole universe was arranged when it was only 380,000 years old. Every warm speck and every cool speck in it is a place where the young universe was a little more crowded or a little more empty than the average. And this is the thing I have been carrying you down toward all night. That pattern did not stay a pattern. It became everything. Because a place that is a little more crowded pulls a little harder. Gravity is patient, and gravity is unfair. It gives more to whatever already has more. So the slightly denser patches, over millions and then billions of years, pulled matter inward toward themselves, and grew heavier, and pulled harder still, and grew heavier still. The tiny warm places in that ancient map slowly deepened into the places where matter gathered, and the tiny cool places, the slightly emptier ones, slowly gave up what little they held and grew emptier, and became the great dark gulfs between things. Every galaxy that exists was seeded in one of those warmer specks. Every cluster of galaxies, every long river and wall of galaxies strung across the sky, every structure large enough to have a shape at all, grew from a difference of 100,000th of a degree, written into the light 13.8 billion years ago. Sit with that gently for a moment, because it is the closest thing to warmth this whole cold night has offered you. You are not standing outside this, you are inside the pattern. The Earth, the Sun, the whole spiral of stars we belong to, all of it condensed out of one of those faintly crowded places in the map. The matter in the floor beneath you, the matter in the water you drank today, the matter in your own hands folded there in the dark. Every particle of it was gathered, over an unimaginable span of time, into a knot that first appeared as a barely warmer whisper in the oldest light there is. You are, quite literally, what one of those specks became. The ancient glow is not just passing through you, it is the seed you grew from, still glowing, still arriving. That is the tiny hope hidden at the bottom of all this absence. Everything we have found tonight has been a kind of missing, light too stretched to see. Photons that outnumber matter 1,000,000,000 to 1, drowning it. A universe that is mostly dark in a way we cannot name. And now, underneath all of it, we find that the cold invisible light is not empty at all. It is holding something. It has been holding it faithfully, without dropping a single detail across the entire age of the universe. It is holding the plan of you. And yet, this is a sleep story, and I will not lie to you even softly. That same pattern, that same map, carries something colder inside its warmth. Because the light is not only a picture of how things began, it is a record of the exact recipe that decides how they end. Written into those faint warm and cool places, in the precise size and spacing of them, is the whole balance of the universe. The little bit of ordinary matter you are made of, the far greater weight of the dark matter that cradled it, and, largest of all, the dark energy pressing everything apart. Astronomers learned to read all three of those things directly out of the sizes of the specks in that ancient map. The seeds of every galaxy, and the reason every galaxy will one day be pulled beyond reach, are the same faint marks in the same faint light. So the presence at the bottom of the night is not a comfort that undoes the dread. It is both at once. It is the oldest photograph of home, and it is a photograph of a face the universe wore only for an instant and will never wear again. The pattern is a fossil. It is frozen. Nothing in it can change now, because the light that carries it left 13.8 billion years ago and has been outrunning us ever since. When you look at that map, you are not looking at how the universe is. You are looking at how it was once, when it was newborn, in a moment that has been finished for almost the whole of time. The glow above your ceiling is a message from a world that no longer exists, sent by a version of the cosmos that is gone, and it is the truest thing we have ever seen. You do not need to solve any of that tonight. You do not need to decide whether it is a comfort or a grief. Let it be both, the way a very old photograph can be both, and let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been holding. The light is still arriving. It is arriving right now. 411 small ghosts in every cubic centimetre of the room, each one carrying its 100,000th of a degree of memory, streaming through you as steadily as it has streamed through everything that was ever going to become anything. We have gone all the way down now, past the stretch, past the count, past the dark, to the pattern underneath, the faint handwriting the whole universe grew from and will be undone by. There is no deeper layer than this one. There is nothing further in. And so the only place left to go is not down, but back and out to ask the quiet question that has been waiting behind all of it. Not what the light is, not where it came from, but what it means that you are here, awake for a few soft minutes, listening to it. Stay with me a little longer and let us drift up toward that. But before we rise all the way, stay down here with me for one more breath, because the pattern we reached is not only the deepest thing, it is also, quietly, the most hopeful, and the reason for that hope is also the reason for a new and gentler dread. Here is the hope. That faint handwriting, that unevenness of 1 part in 100,000, is not noise, it is legible. When the satellites finally cooled themselves colder than the light they were hunting, and lay very still, and listened to the whole sky at once, they did not just find warmth. They found a map, and from that map, from differences so small that across the entire sky the temperature holds steady to about 1 part in 25,000, we were able to read the recipe of everything. Not a guess, a measurement. The age of the universe, 13.8 billion years, give or take a sliver, and the ingredients of it, written plainly in the ripples. Rest on those ingredients for a moment, because they are stranger than the dark ever was. Everything you have ever seen, every star, every planet, every grain of sand, every atom of your own body, all of the ordinary matter in the cosmos comes to less than 5% of what is there. Call it 4.9%, a 20th of the whole. About 27% is dark matter, something that has mass and pulls, but gives off no light of any kind. And the rest, more than 2/3 of everything, about 68%, is dark energy, a pressure woven into empty space that we can name and measure, and still cannot truly explain. We read all of that from the ancient light, from the faint pattern of a fireball that went cold before the first star was born. And there is the hope, quiet as it is, that we are the kind of thing that can lie in the dark, unable to see the most abundant light in existence, and still work out, from its faintest tremor, that the universe is mostly made of things we have never seen. That is a strange and lovely power for a small warm animal to have. You have it. It is part of what you are. But the same pattern that lets us read the universe also tells us where it is going, and that is the new dread, and I will lay it down gently, because it is nothing you need to hold tightly tonight. That 68%, the dark energy, is not resting. It is pushing. The expansion that stretched this light 1089 times, that dragged it from a near-infrared glow into a long invisible microwave hush, is not slowing down, it is speeding up. And so the very thing that hid the light from us is going to keep on hiding it. The temperature of the ancient glow, 2.725 degrees above the coldest cold there is still falling, slowly, patiently, across spans of time that make 13 billion years look brief. It will keep sliding down toward absolute zero and never quite arrive. Follow that far enough, and you reach the softest ending of all. The light does not go out, it simply thins. Its waves grow longer and fainter. Its warmth drains lower and lower, until one distant day the glow that fills every cubic centimeter of every room, the 411 small ghosts pouring through you as you lie here, will have stretched so far that no instrument, however cold, however still, however clever, will be able to find them. The record will still be there, it will simply be unreadable. The universe will forget its own first light. And here is the thread I want to hand you, the one that ties the hope and the dread into a single quiet knot. We are not living at the beginning of the universe, and we are not living at its end. We are living in the narrow, luminous window in between, the brief chapter where the ancient light has cooled enough to be gentle, but not so far that it has vanished. A few billion years too early, and there was no one here to look, and no atom cool enough to hold together. A few 100 billion years too late, and the light will be gone past all finding, and whatever is here, if anything is, will have no way to know the fire ever burned. We arrived in the one long moment when the message is still legible, when the handwriting can still be read. Let that settle, and let it settle softly. There is nothing to do about it. There is nowhere to be but here, and no better time to be here than now, because now is the only time the light was ever going to reach you at exactly this temperature, carrying exactly this much of the beginning. You are not late, you are not early, you are lying in the readable window, breathing slowly, while the oldest light in existence pours through your chest at the perfect faint warmth for a mind to notice it and wonder. So let your breathing lengthen. Let the numbers loosen their grip. The 1089, the 411, the 13.8 billion, the 2.725. You do not need to keep them. They will keep themselves, out there in the ripples, whether or not you remember a single one of them by morning. Let them go the way you would let go of a stone you have been holding, opening your hand in the dark and feeling it lift away. Because we have reached the floor of the science now. There is no deeper measurement, no fainter pattern, no colder instrument left to imagine. We have followed the light all the way from the fog of the first fireball, through the day the universe turned clear, out across 13 billion years of stretching, into the invisible ocean it has become, down to the faint uneven whisper it started from. We have counted it, and named it, and mapped it, and watched it cool. The physics is spent, the threads are gathered in your hand, and what is left when the measuring is done is not another number. It is the older, quieter question underneath all of them, the one that does not have an instrument, the one you can only ask lying still in the dark with the light passing through you, why any of it is here, why you are here to feel it. What it means that the universe, after all this time, grew something that could turn around and look back at its own first morning. We are drifting up toward that now, slowly, the way you rise up out of deep water. Stay with me. The hardest part is behind us, and the softest part is just ahead. So let it stay open. Do not reach for the answer. There is a kind of rest that only arrives when you stop trying to close a question, and this is one of those questions. The kind that was never going to be settled tonight, or in your lifetime, or perhaps in anyone's. Let it be large. Let it stay unfinished. You have carried enough for one night, and the last thing left to do is the easiest thing of all, which is to let go of the need to finish it. Perhaps the light means nothing at all. Perhaps it is only physics doing what physics does, cooling and stretching and thinning across the dark, indifferent to whether anything is here to feel it. A fire that would have gone on fading whether or not a single eye ever opened beneath it. Perhaps 411 photons in every cubic centimeter is just a number, and a body is just a place they happen to pass through, and none of it was ever meant for you. Or perhaps it is the other way entirely. Perhaps the strangest thing in the whole story is not the fire, and not the stretching, and not the 13 billion years of slow cooling, but the fact that somewhere along the way the universe folded a small warm part of itself into a shape that could turn around and know the rest was there. Perhaps the noticing is the point, or perhaps there is no point at all, and the noticing is enough on its own, and needs nothing underneath it to be worth the trouble of a whole cosmos making it. You do not have to choose tonight. You are allowed to let all three of them lie side by side in the dark, the way you can hold several quiet possibilities in your chest as you drift, and wake in the morning to find you never once had to pick, because you are not being asked to solve this. That is the first soft weight to set down. Nobody is grading the night. The oldest question in the sky has been standing unanswered for 400 years. From Kepler wondering why the dark held between the stars, to Olbers turning it over again 2 centuries later, to Poe reaching toward the shape of an answer in the language of a poem, all the way to the patient people who cooled their instruments to 1/10 of a degree above absolute zero, just to catch the faint hiss of the reply. And even now, with the map of the whole sky drawn, the question underneath the numbers is still standing. In no hurry, content to wait a little longer while you rest. You do not have to add to the answer. You do not have to understand every figure you were handed tonight. You are allowed to forget most of them by morning. None of this was ever a test, and you were never behind. So loosen your hold. Let the numbers go first, since they are the heaviest things you have been carrying. Let the 1089 slip away, the exact amount by which the light was stretched on its long fall toward you. Let the 380,000 years go, that long sealed morning before the fog ever cleared. Let the 2.725 degrees go, the temperature of very nearly everything there is, colder than any winter that has ever touched your skin. You do not need to keep any of them. They will be here tomorrow, unchanged, waiting exactly where you left them, because they have been waiting for far longer than you have been alive, and they are very good at waiting. Set them down. Let your hands be empty for a while. Let your shoulders come down from wherever the day left them. Let the breath go slow. And here is the turn, offered gently, with nothing in it to brace against. For most of this night you have been the small thing, and the light has been the large one. A body on a bed inside an ocean older than the stars. That was true, and it will stay true, but turn it once more, slowly, the way you would turn a smooth stone in your palm before sleep. The light is old, yes, older than the sun, older than the earth beneath the room you are lying in, older than the first living thing that ever pulled itself apart to make two. It was already ancient when the earliest galaxies gathered themselves out of those faint, uneven whispers of warmth, the ones 100,000th of a degree apart, the ones that decided where everything would eventually be. And in all of that unthinkable time, across all of that distance, in every cubic centimeter of every empty room in the entire cosmos, the light has been streaming and cooling and passing quietly through, and for almost the whole of it, there was nothing there to feel it. No chest for it to cross, no skull for it to pass behind, no stillness anywhere that could register the faint arrival of the oldest thing that exists. You are that stillness. Not a small exception to the vastness, but the place where the vastness finally grew warm enough, and slow enough, and quiet enough to notice itself at last. Think of how long that took. The instruments took roughly 50 years to learn to see this light, from the accident in the New Jersey field to the map of the whole sky. The eye took far, far longer than that. The slow and patient work of a living world. Billions of years of it, building towards something that could open in the dark and take in what was falling. And you, lying here now with your breathing gone soft and your thoughts beginning to come unmoored, are the far end of that long, slow labour. You are the place where the ancient fire arrives and, for the first time in its entire fall across the age of the universe, lands on something that can wonder where it came from. Not absorb it, not scatter it, wonder about it. That is new. In all the cold streaming history of that light, you and the few things like you are the newest part of the story by an almost incomprehensible margin. That is not a lonely fact. It can be made to sound lonely, in the wrong light at the wrong late hour. A single small point of noticing set down inside an endless cold ocean, so far from anything, so briefly warm. But that is not the true shape of it, and I would not want to leave you there, half asleep, holding the cold end of the thing. Because the light is not the lonely part of this story. The light is the inheritance. It is not evidence that you are separate from the universe. It is the plainest proof there is that you are made of the same fire, the same cooled and scattered fire, arranged for a little while into something soft that can look up. The photons crossing your body right now are not strangers passing through. They are the oldest relatives you have, the last dim heat of the morning that everything, including you, was born out of. You are not a witness standing outside the vastness, peering in. You are a piece of the vastness that came briefly awake. So the dread you might have felt, somewhere back in the long middle of tonight, the small cold turn in the chest when the numbers stopped meaning anything, when the distances went past anything a mind can hold, you can let that soften too. It was never the whole truth. It was only one face of a thing that has two. The other face is quieter and it lasts longer. It is the simple fact that the universe is not empty and it is not dark. It is filled, corner to corner, edge to edge, with a light so old and so gentle that we needed to invent new eyes to find it, and when we found it, it was everywhere, and it was smooth, and it was almost unbelievably calm, a steady even warmth beneath everything, the same in every direction you could ever turn, the same above your roof, and the same on the far side of the sky. Not a scream, not a blaze, a whisper, uniform to about 1 part in 25,000, the most perfect and even thing that has ever been measured in all of nature. The universe did not leave us in the dark, it left us this. It has been holding us in it the entire time, before there was any us to hold, and it will go on holding the room long after the light in it goes out for the night. There is nothing you need to do with that. Nothing to remember, nothing to solve, nothing to carry into tomorrow. You can simply let it be the last large thing you think of before the thinking gives way. That the cold you feared is also a kind of warmth. That the emptiness is not empty. That the oldest light there is has been passing through you gently, unhurried, patient, this whole time, asking nothing, expecting nothing, keeping you company on the long, slow fall toward morning. And that the only thing it ever needed from you, the only thing any of it ever needed, was for something, somewhere, just once, to lie still enough in the dark to feel it arrive. Perhaps that is all any of it was ever for. Perhaps the light made its long journey, thinned and cooled and stretched past all seeing, only so that one small warm thing on one small world could notice it and go still. Or perhaps it was for nothing at all, and the noticing is simply what living things do, the way water always finds the lowest, quietest place to rest. You do not have to choose tonight. You do not have to know which of those is true. The not knowing is allowed to lie down beside you in the dark, as patient and unhurried as the light itself. And here is the one thing that is yours. The only thing that was ever really yours in any of this. Not the age of it, not the size, not the temperature that hovers just barely above the coldest cold there is. What is yours is the choosing of what to make of it. You can hear that the universe is mostly darkness and feel small and forgotten inside it. Or you can hear that the darkness was never once empty, that the oldest light there is has been leaning softly against your skin since long before your first breath, and feel instead accompanied. Both are true to exactly the same facts. The facts do not care which one you carry, so carry the gentler one. Let yourself, just for tonight, be someone the universe kept a light on for. Think, one last soft time, of how far down you sit inside all of it. Beneath your room there is a house, and beneath the house a city, and beneath the city a whole world, turning slowly through a night that is only the shadow it casts upon itself. And around that turning world, everywhere, the ancient glow. 411 faint arrivals in every thimbleful of the air you are breathing, a warmth so even, so smooth across the entire sky that it varies by less than 1 part in 25,000, the most perfect, most uniform thing anyone has ever managed to measure in all of nature. You are lying inside the most flawless object ever found. You have been lying inside it your whole life, and it has never asked anything of you at all, except perhaps to keep breathing slowly while it passes through. When another night finds you awake and searching for something vast and kind to fall asleep against, gravity of sleep will be here, with another long, quiet journey through the things too large to hold and too old to be hurried. But that is for some other night. Not this one. This one is very nearly done. So let the last of the numbers loosen their grip on you now. You do not need to keep a single one of them. The 13.8 billion years. The light stretched more than 1,000 times over on its way to your eyes. The cold that turns out to be not cruelty at all, but only distance and time and the slow patient stretching of everything. Let them all dissolve back down into the one soft feeling that was underneath them the whole time, which is not fear and was never meant to be fear. It is awe, worn smooth and quiet. It is the oldest comfort there is, the comfort of being something very small held inside something very gentle, and very old, and everywhere at once, and entirely unafraid of you. Your breathing is slower now. Your shoulders have already begun to forget the weight they were holding. There is nowhere you have to be tonight but exactly here, resting in the faint, warm, ancient rain of the beginning of everything. Arriving and arriving and arriving, asking nothing back. Let it hold you. Let the room hold you. Let the light that outlived its own fire go on passing through the dark unhurried, while you finally stop keeping watch over it, and let go. The universe did not go dark to lose you. It only dimmed the lamp, so that something as small as you could finally sleep.